The joys.
Okay,
We are live on YouTube,
On
so we got
YouTube.
that sorted out, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy New Year. We are so excited to be back, but we really want to dive in because there's a lot happening in the real estate world, and you may or may not notice, but we're here to show it all to you and tell you all about it, have our point of view. A big thing we're going to touch on today, our bidding war is over. Maybe not. We'll dive into that. So hang tight. Stay tuned for the whole show. But huge changes that came into effect are TRESA. So this is the Trust in Real Estate Services Act that has been implemented. And really it's the trust in real estate. So we've had a lot of issues in the past,
especially through COVID.
A lot of issues during COVID. I know there general public and consensus is there's tons of frustration. So real estate boards are trying to come together and come up with solutions and make sure that the clients are protected as well as realtors. But we're first phase went through already, and this basically just allowed us to be able to incorporate. So for our perspective, we can incorporate our businesses, but also we can now call ourselves realtors.
Yay!
Yeah, funny that wasn't actually a thing. Many people don't know that.
No, so the official term was always salesperson.
Yes.
But a lot of us in the industry don't identify, to glamorize that word, as a salesperson, because real estate, like, we're not selling cars. We're guiding people through a massive transaction. So we just didn't feel the term fit. So now to be able to just use the term realtor or real estate agent is a lot more fitting. Because we see ourselves more as advisors than sales people.
100%. Yeah. So that was first phase. First phase wasn't too overly exciting, a little bit more for our perspectives. Second phase is going to really dive in and get the clients more involved in some major changes that we'll go through here. Major changes. And I would like to say, like, from my own perspective, we're still trying to go through this all. This happened as of December 1st. We had clients from before that we were working with, and they were trying to transition all of those pre-existing clients into this new thing. So, I mean, I'm pretty sure some clients are going to be like, what the hell kind of drugs are my realtors smoking these days? Because we're trying
the good ones.
Yeah, the good ones. Having these conversations are super awkward with some of our clients and just trying to, like, explain the changes that we're going through, why we're making these changes. But even as realtors, like,
trying to absorb them.
Yeah. Because it's the law that basically is governing how we conduct our business and how we advise you. So benefits in that consumers are having a little bit more transparency, but it really does change the complete ballgame and how we can advise in negotiations and in day-to-day operations. So it's a huge learning curve that I hope the public will bear with us, because we're all in the same boat, brokerages and agents alike, on how to advise one another how to navigate this.
And what we're, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so hence our show today. If you're just tuning in, bear with us, because we're kind of just giving a high level overview right now and just how confusing all of this has been.
And try to make it less confusing.
Yeah, we're going to break it down throughout our next 45 minutes and try to make it as easily digestible as we can.
And even for all our realtor friends,
like,
for
definitely
both,
any of our realtor followers that are following, it will be beneficial too, because it was interesting, even just us talking yesterday, not misinformation, but
it's
different information that has been relayed.
Such as law, it's how you interpret it. Let's just not even speak English today.
We all love trying to understand legalese, right? So now throw in massive changes and try to figure out how to apply those to a day-to-day transaction without your clients thinking that you're nuts or on drugs.
And unfortunately, because this is so new, it's not like in past where we were relying on previous case law and scenarios that had played out to then govern what happens going forward. The slate has been wiped dry.
And then even at that perspective, like, you're going to take it to your broker or your broker of record. So that's the people that's like my business. They are in the same boat as us, because to your point, there's no other case. So we're going to kind of hope that some of the more slimy guys get in there, mess up, and then we can learn from them.
And that's the whole point of this is, again, they renamed it Trust in Real Estate Services because everything that we're going to discuss, the overall goal is to build trust and transparency so that both sides have a complete understanding of what kind of relationship you're in, just throughout the process, reading through offers, reading through agreements and so on, it'll all
Yeah.
make sense.
So basically, to start off, anytime that you as a client and realtors, this is super important, we need to 100% share our consumer info guide with all of you. So this is any pre-existing relationships, this is any new relationships. Anytime you are going to engage with a realtor at any level, you now
And-
have to have this guide. And this guide is 13 pages?
Yeah.
13 pages long. It goes through all of the requirements as a realtor. What are the expectations? What choices, options do you have as you go through? And you must understand this document. Your realtor must go through this with you. And there's an acknowledgement to this. So this is even if you're just in the process of, hey, I'm thinking about maybe in the next year, 5 years, that I might consider selling my home. What options do I have for myself? And this guide is the first thing you're going to get. If you're not getting this from your realtor, then ask questions.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this is going to be, and again, just to clarify, like Sarah said, it's a guide. It's not a contract.
Mhm.
It's an information package, basically, that we must, by law, provide to you, the consumer, to really spark a bunch of conversations about how
Exactly.
things will work moving forward.
Yeah.
So you can decide where you want to land. But it does have to be signed, and we have to provide proof to our brokerages that we've gone through it with you.
Mhm.
So
And,
just
and this has to be done early on in the process.
right away.
So there was kind of some past practice where we would go out and show a few houses and see if we could get along with one another first. And then we wouldn't really make you sign any paperwork perhaps until it was time to submit an offer.
Mhm.
Those days are gone. An actual representation agreement maybe won't be signed right away, but this information guide must be presented right
because
away.
it talks about and educates you on the representation.
And
your
helps
options,
us navigate what level of
Service you.
service to provide to you. So
Yeah.
it's going to guide the conversations that we're allowed to have and what information we have that we can share with you and various things.
But I think it's even nice because it is giving you that high level conversation first time. Like I have first time home buyers that I sat down with the other day, and we had this hour-long conversation about just the guide. And it was, okay, this is the process that we're going to go through this whole journey. And it really held me accountable to make sure that I talked about bidding wars and multiple representation and what's our relationship with each other. And are you going to want me to do these things for you? Like, you're coming to me asking for a service. I'm assuming you want me to help you as a realtor. You're not representing yourself.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's really just making us have those conversations, and it gives them a chance to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you can go into it and figure out what level of understanding in real estate do they have as a first-time homeowner or home buyer. They probably don't have much background.
Mhm.
If we're going into the people that are going to upsize, did they actually go through the process
Yeah,
properly?
probably.
Or
Yeah.
they just rush through? Did they understand everything? Like,
Mhm.
I know I bought a house in the past and there was a lot of things that weren't covered. And I was like, now as a realtor, I'm like, oh shit, you missed a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so one of the great things too is again, the whole idea of this is to protect us and
Yes.
our job and our livelihood, because
Yeah.
this is how we eat, guys.
I don't want to get sued.
Or
Yeah.
sued. But it also lays out like expectations of you.
Mhm.
And like, if you do decide to enter into an agreement with us, there are things that we expect from you, meaning like exclusivity.
Mhm.
So it really lays all that stuff out. In our YouTube, we are going to put a link to the guide.
Mhm.
If you would like to take a boo at it while we're chatting, you can just Google RECO, RECO, Consumer Information Guide, and it should
It
pull
should
up
pop up.
the PDF for you.
Yeah.
But again, you can always jump to our YouTube after, and we'll have a link for you there.
If there's any questions throughout us chatting today, by all means, please pop them into the chat. We are monitoring it.
Watching
and we
ourselves.
hope to have like an open conversation here with anybody that's watching as well, and not just be spewing all kinds of information out.
Yes. Because we're going to try not to go all realtor on you. We can keep it kind of like a lower level, easier to
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
But
And 100% if we do go all realtor, stop us or connect with us after, and we'd be happy to help you out.
Yes.
absolutely. Okay, so the next big change was, as we titled our episode, are bidding wars really over?
Maybe first let's talk about what is a bidding war.
Okay, well, a bidding war was through COVID. There
Saw it
was
the most,
not
yeah.
very much inventory and a ton of buyers. So almost every property someone was trying to buy, there were many, many offers on the table at the same time.
Mhm.
And it ended up going, okay, well, if you're offering $1 and they're offering $1.50, we would play the offers against each other to get as most as we can.
But the
for our
buyers never knew the
Right.
contents of any other offers.
So if
that's
you
where
were
the
like,
blind,
oh my goodness, I need to put an extra 5,000 or 100,000, things escalated very quickly.
yes,
You
because
had
you're
no idea.
guessing. You're guessing at what you have to throw on the table
Yeah.
to beat the next bidder.
Yeah, and that is why we saw such a huge inflation in prices.
But I
Because people
think-
were blindly bidding,
Yes.
over asking just to please win a house. Because
Yeah.
sometimes they were offering on like 20 houses or more.
We should make it known though that this was not in the option from the sellers or the realtor. This was how we were governed
This was
as
his
realtors.
Law, as law. Yeah.
We were not allowed to disclose these details. There were a few things we could disclose.
How many? That was it.
Yeah.
How many offers, and we could give a closing date.
And firm or not firm.
Even then, that was sticky. They couldn't
Yeah.
tell you like what kind of conditions were in it. If it was home inspection, financing,
Yeah.
none of those types of things
Yeah.
could ever be disclosed. So we were just like going blind, and you kind of, well, this is kind of the vibe I was getting.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then this is where like a lot of this came into play because the buyer that offered 300,000 over asking may have somehow found out later on that they didn't have to pay that much.
Mhm.
And that they've overpaid for the house, and then they turn around and try to sue their agent. So again, these changes are all encompassing to protect you and
Yeah.
us from that backlash. So they have added a new legislation called open offers.
But it's a
Bit of
little
a-
misleading.
It's very misleading. And honestly, with the three of us sat around a table and we're like, I don't know. Rewind. Open offers
Mhm.
basically now allows the seller, okay, not the buyers, not the agent, the seller,
Mhm.
the right to agree to disclose all, some, or only specific contents of competing offers.
At any time during competing
And they can
Anytime.
change their mind. So
Yes.
if they
Yes.
start the offer process saying, yes, I will, then they can change their mind and say, no, they won't, or vice versa.
But
So-
also, as a buyer, you don't know going in if the seller will disclose anything.
Yes.
Right.
So it's really the sellers do whatever.
So
they
for
want.
example, you're a seller, you get two offers on your property.
Mhm.
You can decide at that time if one offer is better than the other. Maybe one has better money, but one has the closing date you want. Or one has better money, but one is firm, no conditions.
Mhm.
You can agree or not to tell those buyers, okay, well, these are the conditions or lack of conditions I want, and this is the price that I want.
Mhm.
See if you can give me both, and then you'll win.
Mhm.
But I don't know in what situation.
But then I feel like you bring them so close together that now they are going to guarantee a bidding war because you're like, well, now I've given you what you need to be neck and neck.
Yeah.
Rather than there's two very obvious answers. One is the one that you want to go with, or you, in the past, we could take one offer and kind of negotiate with that offer and like work it to form what we needed to or walk away.
Mhm.
But now you're basically bringing all the offers. So say there's 10 offers. Now you're telling all of them level playing ground, and now all 10 of them get to compete.
Yes,
You're not
'cause the-
eliminating anyone.
The one big important thing is that if you disclose one thing, you have to disclose it to all of
Everybody.
the buyers.
Yes.
And that's
You
only
can't-
people that have offers in. That's not
Yeah.
somebody that's
Yeah.
sitting on the sidelines thinking,
Thinking
should I
about
put an
putting an
offer in?
offer.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
where it goes sideways, and this is what really kind of we were scratching our heads, is that now, because we want to protect our buyers as well, right? Like if you're representing the buyer,
Mhm.
it's not in their best interest to disclose to the other buyer what's in their offer.
Mhm.
So now agents are starting to add a clause in basically saying that if they do disclose the contents of their offer, they're going to void the offer.
Which
I don't know how that
helps
would-
you if you're
Really good.
come to be the highest bidder and you
Yeah.
get upset that they've basically tried to fish for more money, but it doesn't help you or
you're
the
the lowest.
situation if you're one of the lowest, because they still can disclose the offer. They really don't care that you're going to back away.
'Cause
They're
you're-
still using it as a bargaining chip to raise everything else.
Yes.
So I don't know. The other
I-
caveat to this too is if you are a buyer, maybe this is going to work in one way, that if you're aware that there's X number of competing offers and the contents are going to be disclosed and you submit an offer like maybe it will cause people just to retract right away instead of
the not
being
so serious
right.
people.
So maybe it will eliminate the number of competing offers. I think it's just going to be based on each situation and the property and the listing price, and there's so many things that will go into this.
And I think the interesting part about all of this, and we kind of touched on this, is you've had realtors that have been in the business for 40 years. And when we were in the COVID bubble, we kind of had a feel for like how people would price or why, like what certain strategies are.
Yes.
Now we're kind of like all level playing field and like, well, why did they do that? And we're all
Yes.
kind of trying to figure out and navigate. So
it's
I think this
really
is gonna
thrown a
be-
loop in strategy. Like, and I
I mean, the
really
idea
has.
is to eliminate those significantly over asking offers, in my opinion. I think it's to eliminate that.
Yeah.
To eliminate the false inflation,
yes.
which we're all still paying for.
But will it actually do that? I don't know. It's
Because
all
it's
going
up
to
to the
depend.
seller.
It's up to the
So-
seller, but it's also going to depend on what's happening in the market. If we go
Yes.
back to a super low inventory market, we still have a
Totally.
housing crisis on our hands. It's
Yeah.
not going to stop the 20 people that are still trying to get them into the
I
door.
almost think it's going to drive the prices more because now people are going to be like, oh, I needed to do 150, not 100. I have the budget because when interest rates come down, people are going to have a lot more money.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. They're just going to know how much more they can compete and they're just going to keep going.
Yeah.
Like I
But again, remember, it doesn't always come down to money.
mean, at the end of the day, in the COVID
Some
bubble,
might
it
kick
came
me in
down
the
to money.
face for that, but
COVID bubble, I
it's
think,
true.
was
It
money.
doesn't. It doesn't.
Well,
It's
right
sometimes-
now we're seeing a huge, like, people's backs are against the wall of power sale,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, yeah.
They need specific dates,
Quick closings.
Yeah.
quick closings,
Yeah.
firm offers.
Yes.
So it,
Yeah. Each
really-
situation is going to be different.
yeah.
But I feel like if you had an extra $200,000, what's another 30 days?
And I don't know.
So expect in the process as a buyer or a seller for this to come up, and give some forethought to whether or not as a seller that's something that you would be interested in disclosing,
Mhm.
and make sure you have that conversation. And as a buyer, be prepared. That
Also
if
for
you are
some strategy
competing-
conversations, like,
Yeah.
and as if you're a realtor, brush up on your negotiation skills because
yeah.
it's going to become. I know this is another example. I think of how it's going to maybe potentially weed out agents that didn't do a lot of advising in terms of strategy and literally just kind of were passing paper
Yeah,
back
they
and
push
forth,
paper.
Yeah.
taking instruction from their client, right?
Right.
So, yeah, we'll see.
That's an interesting one. Would love to know your thoughts. You want to throw them in the comments?
do you think bidding
Yeah, what
wars?
do you think? And as a consumer, what would you're in a situation buying a property and it's that it's going into multiples. What do you think? How do
Are you
feel?
going to let your
Yeah.
details go? Do you think that's a bad idea? Good
Yeah.
idea?
Yeah, as a buyer, do you like it? Yes or no?
It's so
I'm anticipating a Reels.
It's so upsetting to me though to think about those like highly emotional COVID moments when you had those clients who this was their 20th offer on a property that they've been beat out on, and they're so sick of the process and the fact that they can't know
Yes.
what they're up against and what's happening. But I don't know, being given that knowledge might not work.
But also not emotional though. What's to stop them from being like, okay, I'm going to throw another 100 at it.
I'll
because
figure it
they're-
out.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't know.
again, during that whole bubble, we got to make sure we have time for the rest of the stuff.
Yes.
It's going to happen for every topic.
Yeah.
But in COVID, a lot of people were already maxed out. They were giving their max.
Yeah.
So then at least they know, like, okay, you know what? I did all that I
I
could
do
do.
the best I could, yeah.
I can't go any higher without like making my parents refinance their home.
Which a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like your parents.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, but I think that definitely jumps you into multiple and designated
Yeah,
representation.
Another big change has in terms of the kinds of representation. So in the past, multiple representation would be considered if I was your agent, for example, as you're a seller and I'm representing you as an agent, and then I also have a buyer that I'm representing that would like to offer on your property. That was considered multiple representation. But it would also be considered multiple representation if I was the listing agent and Jacqueline or Sarah we were in the same brokerage and they brought a buyer client to us. The
So
fact that
we're
we were,
all housed under Century 21. We were.
it was
and-
considered,
Even though we didn't have the same clients, we had no knowledge on each other's
no.
deals or what the client was or was not willing to give or accept.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We were under the same umbrella, so they considered it multiple reps.
Because it was really kind of silly because they assumed that because the brokerage had information that this was shared with everybody, which it
Well, 'cause
wasn't.
It never
Think about,
was. It's so weird.
So
Think
yeah,
about how much
bothering
real
me.
estate's changed in the last 10 years, right? Like
Yes.
since we got into it, and it used to be tiny brokerages where like everybody was together for 20 years in the same office and they just
Yeah,
had
maybe
this
so, yeah.
expectation.
yeah, maybe more open conversations about things.
Yeah.
I feel like we experienced that being on a team, but
Yeah,
as like individual solo agents,
no.
I never run into that.
Yeah, so the change now is basically multiple representation will only be considered when it is one agent representing both sides.
Asterisk. If the brokerage chooses
Oh, right.
designated representation.
Sorry, yes. There is now a choice being given at the brokerage level whether to continue under this brokerage representation model or whether to adopt designated representation, which is meaning like I'm your designated representative. So most brokerages, for simplicity's sake and to avoid headaches, have adopted this designated representation model.
Whereas I'm a solo agent, I represent you solely. Nobody else in the brokerage is your agent.
And it would only be multiple representation if I then also brought you a buyer, and you as the consumer have the right to decide whether you want me to allow to represent that other buyer,
Yes.
or whether I have to find representation for that buyer. And so anyway, this consumer info guide really does do a good job, I find, of explaining all of those different scenarios and the things that you need to think about and make some decisions on how you want to instruct us to handle things for you.
Because for those who don't know, multiple representation basically, like, of course, we can represent you as the seller and bring you a buyer and represent the buyer. But legally, what changes is how we handle negotiations. So really quickly, basically, it removes our ability to specifically guide you to say, you know what, I think you should sign back at like $5,000 less. We can't say that anymore. We can say, hey, I think this price is fair market value, but it's up to you what you'd like to sign back at if you would like to. Like, we have to be a little
going
more
back to our
generic.
previous conversation when we're talking about how to go about handling multiple offers and whatnot, we cannot give specific information on how to handle each offer. We can only give, here's the offer, you decide.
I use the
break it
reference
down.
as like, I was once on this side of the fence representing you with you.
Now I'm on
I'm now on the fence.
straddling the fence.
Having to, easily, basically service both sides, for lack of a way of saying it. Yes. And be more of a neutral party instead of being able to really advise
So
you.
sure.
That's what everybody's here for. A little laugh and some real estate knowledge.
All right.
Well, do we want to dive a little more into designated representation? Because I feel like people are going to see that a lot.
I feel like they are, but I also feel like in
was
most
a given.
cases, I feel like most cases people didn't really fully understand the multiple representation because we never really had that sort of crossover unless we were working on the team or working with a partner. And everyone I've talked to so far is pretty okay with the multiple representation. But I feel like when it comes down to actually being in the moment, perhaps they'll be like, no, we don't want you to walk away.
Yeah.
We need you. So
Yes.
maybe that change will happen.
Yeah.
And for myself, if I'm working with buyers, I'm automatically putting you guys on there so that you guys can just help me out if I'm out of town or can't do a showing. I'm going to have you guys step in as I normally do.
As a designated rep. So
As a
that's the
designated
difference.
rep,
Multiple
yeah.
rep is like, it's not an agency that we sign you up for specifically. You would start with a designated representative. So you hire Jessica or you hire Sarah or myself to work with you. We literally now have to name ourselves on the document, whether it's a buyer rep or a listing agreement. And if I am going to go away on vacation and want Sarah to take over, we now have to name her as a secondary designated representative on any of the paperwork. So it just kind of clarifies. I know a lot of consumers out there who have had issues with agents going on vacation or just disappearing from their lives for weeks and they don't hear anything from them. This is kind of to hold them accountable and put someone on paper in their place to take over for them if something were to happen.
Yes. And I think also if you ran into an issue of like, okay, my agent took off for 3 weeks. I wanted to put an offer on this house. How do I get out of this contract, so to speak? before, people would come to us and be like, oh, my agent sucks. I want to get out of this contract. And as realtors, legally, we weren't able to tell you that you can go and get out of this contract, or you can go to the brokerage. Like, we had to really tiptoe around that verbiage and how to explain to you. Like, we couldn't actually explain to you the path to take to get out of a contract. Now the information is being provided to you, which is great.
Because that's another point that we're going to touch on.
Sorry, I'm
later.
jumping ahead.
Yes, it all muddles
I just-
together.
But saying though, like, coming back to the whole designated part of this, if you're working with me and you're not happy with me, you go to my brokerage, the brokerage can assign you or give you a different agent like Jessica to work with and say, okay, we can still help you out as Century 21. We just have a different agent. So there are those options.
Or EXP.
I mean, then we're not designated. Then we're doing referral. This is the conversation we got into yesterday. There's still hoops and rigmaroles to go through, but like, you're not stuck with an agent. That's all I'm trying to say is you do have options
Right.
if that were ever a problem.
Right.
You're never going to have that problem with me.
Never.
You might.
No.
You're next.
So then self-represented parties.
Mhm.
So this is going to come to you in the guide when you first get it. It's going to talk to you about being self-represented, or if you're going to be using an agent. So that's where in most cases, people are looking for an agent to help them. They've come to me and said, hey, Sarah, I have questions about real estate. You're basically telling me you need a realtor to help you. A self-represented party, you're going to have two options now. Before, we used to have a few different ways you could go about this, but now you're either represented by an agent or you're not, and you get no help from us. We cannot give you any sort of details on how to list, how to negotiate, how to do staging, any of those details. You're basically fly away, little birdie.
And this is one of those things that is put in place to protect us. We're notorious. You've probably seen the memes and the videos out there of people who hire agent A, but continuously call their bestie, who's also an agent that they didn't hire, for advice because they don't trust agent A.
Been there.
It happens
for
all
calling.
the time. People seek free information and guidance from us all the time, which puts us in a really uncomfortable legal position,
Yeah.
especially when it's friends or family, because we are not allowed to guide you if you're under a contract with another
We
agent.
really want to, but
Can I?
legally,
Well, do we want to if they went with another agent?
I mean, if it was someone that lives like hours away, and it makes sense. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to service you.
Yes.
But your next door neighbor. I mean, it's
Right.
not sure.
Oh, yeah.
So this is really basically, there used to be client and consumer.
Mhm.
And consumer was such an awkward gray area where we could guide you, but only sort of, kind of.
It was kind of like an a la carte. I always kind of looked at it like, you can like buy this service from me,
Right.
but like,
I feel like the classic example again was back to those COVID multiple offers. If you had a unrepresented person come into an open house, you're holding an offer night that night, and they quickly want to put an offer in. It was like, okay, we'll sign a customer service agreement because I'm basically just helping you to form this offer. That's the only service that I'm giving you.
right.
And we're throwing it in a pile to see if it sticks, basically.
But they have no duty to each other past
No.
that.
Yeah.
So now they've eliminated consumer. That's gone. At no point can we be gray anymore.
Yeah.
You're either represented or you're not. And if you choose to be a self-represented party, yes, there's paperwork that you need to sign to say, I don't want your help.
Yeah.
I think they can still choose not to sign it, but we have to at least provide it
Yeah,
and
sure.
prove that we have provided it.
Yeah.
And then you're on your own.
Yeah.
We cannot guide you on price, anything
We
above
can't
and
even do
beyond
it.
what is public knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
we cannot even write or draft an offer for
No.
you. You need to figure it out yourself or go pay your lawyer to do it.
So then in that case, you're basically just going to be a represented person, but you can decide what services you want within that. So like in our Schedule A, when we do a buyer rep, we can do a Schedule A and say, we're only providing this service to you. So you
No.
can still,
No, not now.
I thought you could though.
No.
That is like a hard line.
So sorry, can you be more specific on what you're saying no to though? Because
If they choose to be a self-represented party.
no, I'm saying they want to be represented.
Oh, so then your client
Yes.
service agreement will just outline what
That's what-
services
that's
you're
what I
having.
said.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I thought you meant a
No, no, no.
self-represented
No,
person.
no,
You're
no.
going to choose some
I
services.
did not say that. Do
No.
not take that as a
Yes.
thing. excellent.
Yes.
No, you're going to be a represented party,
Yes.
but you can decide what services you want in your Schedule A.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually,
You just
To
made me
that
like
point-
totally question my whole life. I was about to walk out of here.
well, that's a good segue into the next part, which
Yes.
is a confusing term: disclosures.
Mhm.
For the realtors out there, this is not the disclosure that you're thinking of. It doesn't mean disclosing that I'm
There's
selling
a
my
hole
own
in the
house.
wall.
Like, we still have to do that too, or latent
yeah.
defects.
Yeah.
They're basically calling this disclosures, but what it means is we now have to lay out, whether it's on a listing
Mhm.
or on a buyer agreement,
Mhm.
in writing
Mhm.
at the time of like you obtaining our services,
Mhm.
how you can end the contract. So what basically the divorce looks like.
Yeah.
We
pretty nice.
have to lay it out. Yes, exactly. Clearly how, if you choose to get out of your contract at some point, how that will work. And again, a big one for listings, because a lot of agents may be unhappy, or sellers may be unhappy with their agent. And then they say, well, I want to cancel the contract. And all of a sudden the agent says, okay, but you have to pay me A, B, C, and X, Y, Z.
For all the expenses that I've.
And they never had to
incurred.
provide any proof of these expenses, so on and so forth. So they kind of were holding people hostage.
Mhm.
Or consumers were trying to get out of contracts just so that they could go get a better deal with someone else. Like, it was kind of dirty pool all around. So this is eliminating that
Yep.
and really laying out in black and white how you can get out of the contract, when and why, and if it's going to cost you money. You also are going to have to lay out in writing what services you will provide. So if you are signing a listing agreement, your agent will have to lay out advertising, open houses, things of that nature, to again spark conversation and make sure there's a clear understanding with all parties on
What are you
what you're
paying
gonna
for?
get.
What are you
Yeah, what are
paying
you paying
for?
for?
Yeah.
Mhm.
100%.
Now, we found this a little uncomfortable
Mhm.
because there are some situations where, like, well, what if the house sells quickly and I put it in the contract that I'm going to advertise weekly for X amount of dollars?
I didn't have the chance to do that.
yeah, I guess that's obviously something that we would have to put into the contract to say,
Mhm.
like, an exclusion in legalese terms, basically
Mhm.
saying, like, unless I do my job and sell your house faster.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Yes.
But also if markets change or what, I had just recently, as some of you may know, got booted out of my Facebook.
Mhm.
It got hacked.
Mm.
So what if I had it in contracts that I,
Would provide Facebook advertising.
and
Yeah.
I couldn't because my whole account was hacked and they maxed out my credit card.
Mhm.
So it's definitely going to spark a lot more information, a lot more discussion, but basically every aspect of the transaction and expectations now has to be laid out on the buyer agreement or the listing agreement.
Yep.
Mhm.
And then I was gonna kind of, are you done there?
Yeah.
So then if you're
Oh.
not getting,
Mhm.
it's okay, we can come back.
Yeah.
If we're not getting that service that's in your contract and you feel that you're having an issue with your realtor in any sort of way, whether it's selling or buying, we are now presenting you with more information on how to go about the disciplinary act on this. So like if you, in the past, if we had an issue with another realtor or we were aware of a scenario, we would have to go and formally disclose it to Rico.
Yep.
And say, this is the problem that we have. We want to make a formal complaint. Disciplinary actions would happen, possibly. Now, from the consumer perspective, we're going to give you a little bit more information. It comes in the information guide on how to actually go about contacting higher ups or reporting problems and going through the process of saying, I have this issue. This is what I was promised. I'm not receiving it. What steps can I take? And it's not like we're sitting here as realtors. We really have to be careful on what kind of information, going back to that perspective before, we couldn't tell you how to get out of contracts.
Mhm.
You now are getting all that information as clients or as the consumer upfront, and you're getting yourself a little bit more protected here. You know how to actually escalate issues and how to deal with things. And I don't know if anybody caught this, but down in the States, there was a lot of lawsuits that happened this past year. They're still
Yeah,
happening.
it's still going on.
And this, I think, is really driven from all of that because they're trying to make sure that consumers are protected. Also, the COVID nonsense. Realtors are being protected. I mean, from my perspective, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit nervous because like I feel like I'm a pretty dot my I's, cross my T's kind of realtor, but like there's a lot of cans of worms that are being opened here, and
Mhm.
a lot of like, well, I've always done this, but is this correct or is this changing? And like, there's going to be a lot more.
Second-guessing everything.
Yeah.
So basically, to the real estate council, realtors are guilty until proven innocent.
Mhm.
We have to prove like the opposite of why we are not guilty.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And ignorance is not an excuse. But one of the other interesting things for this one is for us, it was super uncomfortable before, especially for us, like in a smaller town and community where we work with our fellow realtors a lot. We come into contact with each other a lot. We're on the same boards. We go to parties together. So if we do a deal together and I felt like something happened that shouldn't have happened, we had to put in a formal complaint previously.
And it's very uncomfortable because that person is aware of who the complainant is.
Yeah.
And yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
now basically we can notify RICO, like whistleblowers, I think is what you called them
Yeah.
yesterday, without kind of putting our neck on the chopping block.
Mhm.
I think that's great. And
So
I think
good
it's,
and bad.
right? Hopefully nothing comes across. Be nice,
No.
guys.
And well, just on that note, the last thing we wanted to say too is that it's just there's stricter consequences now as well in terms of fines and things like that for anybody that does basically break the law in terms of real estate transactions. So yeah.
Mhm. But I think it's like ethics too, right? Is real estate council has opened it up so that they
Yes.
can investigate even without a complaint being put in.
Mhm.
So if they see a bunch of deals go through that like make the hair on the back of their neck stand up, they're going to start investigating us without any notice or warning or preemptive.
Complaint from someone.
Yeah.
I do feel like there was quite a few issues that went through with like illegal people buying, like illegal purchases with bad money, like, and I think that maybe is why they're bringing this into.
Yeah, money
Yeah.
laundering and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Mhm.
My brain.
So there was just something else that I wanted to mention about the disclosures, and this is a big one. I can't believe I jumped over it.
Mhm.
Is we have to talk about remuneration, is what we call it technically, but commission. Well up front, and while we believe that this always should have been the case,
Mhm.
legally should have always been the case, now they're making it an extra step where we have to put it in the Schedule A of a listing or buyer agreement to ensure that we have discussed it.
Mhm.
So a lot of these changes, and I might get punched in the face for putting this out there, but part of the big issues in the US, and again, we always follow suit, is that sellers were starting to get really peeved with having to pay the buyer's agent.
Mhm.
I guess there was a lot of like, just not dishonesty, but like,
I think the way it was presented to consumers was, here's your
You have to
5%
pay
commission, and they weren't being explained how it was split up,
How it
or
was
that
broken
that
down.
5% didn't have to be 5%.
Yes.
And I think that's where it really
Yeah.
stems
Yes.
from.
And
We can point to that here, and that there was kind of a common practice where a brokerage would kind of dictate what they felt was fair compensation to a buyer's agent. So they
Yes.
would kind of say to you, like, look, it's our brokerage policy that we don't do anything less than 2.5% for a cooperating agent.
Yeah.
And you kind of were not necessarily under that rule of thumb. Like there was some
Somewhat the
wiggle room
for
there,
the
but
most
it was
part.
practice in order to keep the playing field level.
yeah. So if like when we were with our previous brokerage, they did have a policy, it was 2.5%
Mhm.
had to be offered to the buying agent to make it a level playing field.
As a
For-
listing agent, you could negotiate your
Yes,
rate.
so the
Your
only time
side.
you could reduce was your own commission.
Yeah.
Which kind of stinks because on a listing you have all the expenses. But
Yes.
whatever it is, what it is.
Yeah.
Now we discuss this way ahead of time, that's all great and fine, but there are sellers who are now refusing to pay the buyer agent co-op,
Mhm.
or they're offering less. Now, what we have to explain is that is legally within your wheelhouse, but we also have to legally explain that you're literally going to cut your legs off.
Mhm.
Because now you're forcing a buyer who's already had to save astronomical amounts of money for their down payment to come up with more astronomical amounts of money to pay their agent.
Mhm.
and they can't mortgage that.
Yeah.
So it just becomes a little more difficult. Now, we ethically still are supposed to show your property.
We're
We
gonna
know
tell you
not
pros and
all
cons.
agents are ethical.
Mhm.
But it will spark a conversation with buyers before they ever go see it, because your agent has to say, hey, listen, I know this is your favorite house on the list, but it's going to cost you an extra 2.5% or 2%, whatever was on your buyer rep,
Mhm.
above and beyond whatever the price is that you're going to negotiate.
Because I
So I
have
think
to
we
be
should-
compensated.
We should just say that when we came up with our buyer rep at the beginning, we decided as an agent, this is what my fee is, call it 2%, 2.5%. If we come to a house that isn't paying that, you're responsible.
Right.
So that is already predetermined, because when we first sent you that consumer guide, we talked about commissions. And then when we signed you onto a buyer representation agreement, that is when we decided this is 100% what I, as a realtor, am going to make. And if the seller isn't paying that, you need to come up with this extra funds.
Yeah, which is really kind of always been the case.
Mhm.
But what ends up happening in most cases is the buyers don't love that property enough. And they'll say, you know what? Take it off the
Take it
list.
off the list. On top of that, it affects list price strategy.
Yes.
Because if you're only offering a couple of thousand in compensation for a cooperating agent, your listing price better reflect that, because a buyer's not going to pay an elevated price and then still have to pay out of pocket.
It's also a wash though, because if a buyer was going to pay $10,000 to the agent, they would have paid $10,000 to the seller, the seller would have had to give that to the agent.
But if
It's
they
a
price the
wash.
house properly.
Yes, it's
Yes,
a wash
yeah.
generally on the listing side. A good agent should be able to negotiate a fair market value with your commission of the full 5% kind of built into that.
Encompassed, yeah.
Yes.
But again, I just want to stress that buyers can't mortgage this
That amount.
additional commission.
Which is huge.
And that is a huge difference,
Mhm.
where you're getting this big check on closing day as the seller, and you just say, okay, cut part of that over to the agents.
Yeah.
Buyers can't do that.
Like I couldn't see that working if you've got a house that needs like extensive renovations and someone's going to need cash to do the renovations. You're taking $10,000 from their reno budget to pay up commission. Like I think you almost need like a move-in ready perfect home or a brand new home or
Mhm.
something for that to even be an option. Otherwise, like who's going to?
So just
And I'm sorry, I'm
really-
not working for free.
No, you really gotta weigh the cost and the effect, because I'm telling you right now, ethical or not, whether it's because the buyer chooses or the agent is advising that buyer to skip it, you're gonna get less viewings and it's gonna take longer for your house to sell.
Yeah.
But legally speaking, which is what we're here today to talk about,
Yeah.
is that has to be discussed in advance ahead of time, and you have to know that you do have the right to
Make a decision.
pay or not pay, or pay less to the co-op agent if you want.
I think this is kind of backfire in the end, and it's going to come down to now, are we going to run into clients or potential clients that are like, you're not worth 2.5%, you're only worth 1%, and that is going to
Well, I think
I don't
that
know. This could be the start of completely changing the ball game as to how we conduct real estate
Mhm.
transactions. It could be.
it could, but
Yeah.
I feel like if that's the case, it's gonna. So I'm on a coaching group with a bunch of people in the States, and I've asked them specifically, how is this kind of, what's the fallout like? Are
Yeah.
you guys seeing a lot of listings coming up with no co-op? And they're like, nope.
Yeah.
I've only come across maybe one or two.
Mhm.
Most places still offer 2 to 2.5%, depending on the area standard.
Yeah.
Because it's very quickly people will see the value in their agent. We do not
Yeah.
just push paper and open doors.
Yeah.
There is a lot more to it. And if you don't believe me, be a self-represented party and then
Try it. Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for my first time, I came across one recently that wasn't paying, and I called you guys, and I was like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
like, what is that? What is this? Am I
Yeah.
reading this right?"
Do I really
Yeah.
have to call my buyers and tell them they have to pay me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I called the agent, and I was like, "So is this right?" Like that's how shocking it was. It was the first time I'd ever just seen like.
Did you say the agent was uber embarrassed?
Yeah.
She's like,
yeah.
Well, because even back in the days of like ComFree and all that stuff, like that was a big misconception that people thought it was commission free. It
Same
was
with
not.
1% realty.
Yeah, like you're putting that listing onto MLS and you have to pay a co-op fee. They're negotiating their listing price, which may be lower, yes, because you're getting a limited amount of services,
But
but you're still paying out the buyer co-op fee.
Just
And people
for a
didn't
lot.
really realize that.
less service.
It was
Yeah.
just how they marketed themselves, and it worked in some cases.
Yes.
But I also feel like they did a lot more, like as the buyer, you had to do a lot more work for what?
Oh yes,
Like,
yeah. You
I had a
handled
friend
all
do
of
it,
your
and I was like,
showings.
Holy
Yeah.
moly.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's as realtors, we're gonna say probably don't go that route.
Yeah.
It's all in, again, making sure that you can, the negotiation skills and the people skills, have the ability as a realtor to properly explain the pros and cons of this to your
Mhm.
sellers.
Yeah.
I think that is we're going to see a big culling of the industry from these changes in a good way.
Yeah.
Because not everyone's going to be able to articulate
So why do we
this
want a
properly.
culling of the industry? How many realtors are in Ontario? Anyone want to take a guess?
In the last 10 years, it's literally over
Exploded.
quadrupled. Like,
Since COVID,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
exploded.
Yeah.
So we're at 96,000 realtors, and I believe there was
On the
some
Toronto real estate board.
yeah, there was a drop off this year. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
There was a slight drop off. There's some other changes that happened in the industry. They're expecting a little bit more drop off, and that was just like mandatory the
insurance.
wellness program that they gave us,
Mhm.
which
Thanks
is just
for that.
awesome.
Yeah.
Did not like that. So basically, we have health benefits now. We never needed.
We have forced health
Forced.
benefits.
I don't
We have
need
to
them,
self-pay
but I
for
have
them.
to pay
Yes.
a ridiculous
Yes.
amount of
Let's
money
hope
for
get
them.
the benefit
One for
now.
Yeah.
Everyone I've told about that is absolutely appalled.
Me
I
too.
know, me too.
Me too.
Yeah. They're like, what do you mean you have to pay for it? I was like, I signed up as a realtor to say that I don't need to have benefits. I was fully aware when I signed up into this career.
Yeah.
And now I have to pay for it. And don't get me wrong, there are people that need this coverage,
Yep.
100%. But for someone who did not need it,
That their spouses have full coverage.
Full
Like,
coverage.
nope, I'm
it's
good.
a pain in my ass to have to fork out another X amount of dollars that don't have
The
for
worst
something I
I
don't
feel
need.
like is for our senior realtors that
Yes.
still have to self-pay the same amount but get their benefits clawed back
Yeah.
over the age of 65. So
Yeah.
what are you paying for?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
That's a whole
terrible.
other episode.
Whole other
I know.
episode.
But we won't. because
All of
it's
the realtors would come onto that one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Anyways, but as of January 1st, where there was a slight change as well that comes from CREA. So this isn't the same governing group that we're talking about right now. This is a different one that we're governed by. But basically, when you see the coming soon signs that are on people's properties, we can only have those out 3 days prior to it actually coming live. So gone are the days of having a sign up for 3 weeks, that it's coming soon and driving up all of that excitement.
Or months.
Yeah.
So if you see it coming soon, it should be on the property within those 3 days. Otherwise, there's consequences to that.
Yeah.
So this is the exclusive listings that we're going to have. So that's changing. Whereas like if I had a listing coming up, I used to be able to market it to the general public. I could market it to my friends and family, social media, all that jazz, try and bring my own buyer in.
It just was not on MLS.
It wasn't
That's
on
the
MLS,
exclusive.
yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. So now that's changed. That is gone. We can only specifically contact someone who is specifically in need of that specific property.
Can't put a sign on the lawn.
No.
Can't do anything.
So
And it's to eliminate, like, how many times have we driven past a property and you know it's the agent's house and they have a sign up on the lawn coming soon.
Mhm.
It's just they're advertising themselves.
or like
Yeah.
during COVID, remember how many times you'd see a house come up and then it was sold within 5 minutes? You're
Yeah.
like, what the freak? How'd that
never
happen?
actually went live.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
like,
that
it's
kind of
just-
stuff is going to be eliminated. So I mean, I definitely had a bunch of buyers that were like, I love that house. Why couldn't I see that house? And then you had to have that conversation. Well, there must have been like somebody got in there early or whatever. So it helped local agents a lot, I think. But
But they're also really trying to weed out multiple rep.
yes.
They're trying to weed out any kind of implied representation. So again, I don't think we even talked about BRAs and how we have to sign. We need to talk about that.
What?
We have
BRAs
almost
and
10
how
minutes
they
left.
have to sign them like ahead of time.
I touched on that.
We talked about that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oops.
We
So
talked about
BRA,
the
I
guide
said
has
that-
to be presented right away.
Yeah.
Before you go look at houses.
Never mind.
Yes.
I forgot what I was going to say there.
Okay.
All good.
Moving
So
on.
yeah, changes there. Jess, I know that you caught the changes that are coming for the third.
Yeah, so we talked about there was Tressa Phase 1, Tressa Phase 2. There will be a Tressa Phase 3 that is in the works. They're starting to work on this sometime this year. And basically, the Toronto Real Estate Board is lobbying for additional changes as it comes to limiting for sale by owner, and basically that you need to have the legal representation of an agent helping you, which I think is really in the general public's best interest in terms of a legal perspective. Creating an actual ombudsperson at the RICO level as a neutral party to help negotiate any kind of conflict there. Having specialist designations as like a legal thing in terms of being a commercial real estate agent or a condo specialist. Those are sometimes things we can get through our real estate board that you might see acronyms on someone's business card, but this will become like an actual legal designation.
An actual important thing.
An important
not just
thing.
a bunch of acronyms
Yes,
at the bottom
yes.
of their email signature.
Some higher education standards. I think the biggest one that they're doing, this has been brought up quite a bit, and I know that it exists in BC. It's a cooling off period. There is a cooling off period that applies right now to new build homes. So you can go in and put a deposit on, and you have 7 days. Usually, if you decide you have some ill feelings about it and you want to back away, you've got the right to do that and collect your deposit. They were talking about trying to make this mandatory for resale homes as well, which in my personal opinion would be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah,
because of the domino effect that happens with resale home transactions.
Can't allow a purchase for that.
No, and I think it came up as a possible solution because of the multiple offer situation and the COVID crazy buying and buyer's remorse that may have came from that and getting caught up in the emotional, negotiations. But that would be so detrimental to this industry. I hope that never
It'd be a
happens.
freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
And I know BC already does that, and I've
Yes.
heard that it's not great in
No,
BC. They're
no,
having
it's a
trouble with that.
nightmare. Yeah.
So
So
what
anyway,
were you
because like
saying?
really, if you need a cooling off period, use a condition.
Yes,
Just
yes, that's what
that-
conditions are there for.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you're going in firm, understand what that means. There should be no buyer's remorse period.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. What did you
And if
want
you're
to
an
ask
agent and
me?
your clients are going in firm, please put it in your schedule that they are aware of what a firm and binding offer is.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll circle back to it. I can't remember where you said something, and I was like, "Oh, really? I didn't know that."
Higher education.
Oh, what was that?
Just that they're making it more, like going to revamp again in more detail the education level that we have to
Good.
have.
Are they going to give us some negotiation training?
Right?
So interesting because they just did the Humber. They switched over to Humber. What in the last 3-4 years?
I have been licensed for going on
5?
7 years, and it has changed 3 times
Mhm.
since I have had my license.
Really? Because I did Humber.
Yes.
And granted, you do a whole bunch of sitting at a computer reading a bunch of mumbo jumbo. You come out, you're like, you didn't teach me anything
No.
because I don't know how the fuck to be a realtor
No.
right now. Sorry. But it was really coming out and working with a team and working with you guys was a godsend. Like I don't know how solo agents come out and don't have somebody mentoring them because there's so much you don't know.
Yeah.
And it's really like the people side of it. And I don't know how you teach that other than having a negotiation course as part of like literally just how to talk to people.
But it is interesting
Our
to know
generation
that they're
is
going to be
losing that.
changing. Like, is it prerequisites that are coming, or is it the?
I don't know the
Okay.
specific details of that, but
So anyone
they're
that's
working on
looking
some
to become
higher
a realtor.
education standards in
Yeah.
the industry.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, it shouldn't be like just passing a
Any general.
5-minute online quiz, right? It should be.
Hence 96,000 realtors.
Yeah, like maybe that's why we have 96,000 realtors because it was far too easy to get your
Well,
license.
when we got our licenses, it was pretty
Yes.
easy.
There was also a lot of cheating through my
Mhm.
transitioning in. I remember there was
yeah.
like so many people that were getting in trouble and like
And
getting
you go
like, I
out
was
to
like,
your
"What?"
car after your first exam, and all of the cars in the parking lot are flyered with like, "Call us for all the answers to the next exam," and blah 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 blah. It was
Really?
terrible.
Oh, I-
Yes, that's
so-
what happened to me.
I was in COVID when
Yeah.
it came out, and so we ended up going into like the virtual exams. I only did one in house,
Okay.
and then my next one was all online. But I went through the whole hiccup of like they didn't know how to do anything, and courses were wrong, and like it was a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
And
Never
they did
take
try
me
to
back.
make it a little like to weed people out because they made it mandatory to be in class for certain sessions when you went through in Humber.
No, they changed it because COVID hit, so I didn't even have to go through that. Yes, because I hated driving to the city.
So that'll be interesting to see anyway.
Yeah. Okay.
Next interest rate announcement for January 24th.
What's gonna happen, ladies? We going up? We holding? We going down?
Predictions? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't think we're gonna cut yet, but I think it's gonna come sooner than later. I'm gonna guess March will be a cut.
I agree 100%.
0.25.
Yeah, I think
Cut.
so too.
Yeah.
I think we'll hold, and then I think March, and then I think by the end of like 2024, I think we'll be back by that 4% mark. I think
Yeah.
2025, like maybe the threes.
Mhm.
Maybe.
A lot of people have said to 3 by the end of 2024.
I know, but I feel
That's
like
a
that.
pretty aggressive downward
But
spiral.
exactly, that's why I'm saying
Yeah.
2025 because I feel like that's too aggressive. Like that's almost like they went up so quickly and they're going to drop so quickly and not understand how it actually changes the market. Because we've said it 1,000 times. How many pre-approvals are sitting on the sidelines right now and can't get in? They just need like 1% or 2% to come down, and it's going to be flooded.
And
Like,
I
people are
believe this
talking
spring
like-
market is going to be very, very busy.
Yeah.
I agree, and
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of people waiting that are going to kick themselves for waiting.
Yes.
I know that like
Sorry.
affordability is tough because interest rates are high.
Yeah.
They're not going to come down so astronomically. Try to get yourself, go to a broker, try to get yourself into a shorter term.
a year or two.
But
and then
those people
resign.
that signed at 1.5 or under, never happening again in history.
No,
So
I
just be
freaking
thankful
pray no.
that you basically got some free money for a little while. It's never coming back to
But
that.
did you
You
see
have
how
to pivot.
many like millions of dollars? I think it was trillions of dollars of mortgages being re-signed in 2025, 2026.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if they don't fix those rates by then, like
those people that
I'm
way
screwed, for God's
overpaid
sakes.
for their
Yeah.
houses.
I didn't overpay, but still, like I bought before any of the bubble, and even if I had to re-sign at today's rates, like I'd probably be selling my house.
Yeah.
Like it's tough. Or
Yeah.
like I'd probably actually extend my amortization, which is what most people will do.
Yeah,
Would
there's
do,
other
so-
alternatives.
Yeah, you don't have to sell your house.
If you're sitting on the sidelines right now as a buyer and you can afford it,
Mhm.
okay, that's the key factor. If you can afford it
Mhm.
right now,
Yeah.
take the jump
Mhm.
2 minutes.
and just try to get yourself into a shorter term to
Yeah.
refi in a couple of years when rates are back a little more stabilized.
Yeah.
But you are not going to have the selection you have right now, and you are not going to have the bargaining power you have right
And
now.
I think inventory is
It
about
is.
to pick up. Like there's a lot of buzz happening out there. All the realtors, like we met right before Christmas,
Mhm.
everybody's saying like clients are starting to get busy.
Yeah.
So I think that wraps up today's show though, because we're about to hit our 1 hour mark here. This was a great episode, ladies.
Yeah.
awesome.
Any questions again, please reach out to us. We'd love to chat further about this.
Yeah.
And
And anything that you want to see this year, show wise.
yeah,
Shoot us
we need
some-
some ideas.
We have like a couple for the next 2, I think, which will be pretty cool. But yeah, we'd love some new input, some things that you enjoy seeing. Like sometimes we feel like we're repetitive and maybe you don't want to see it, maybe you do.
Yeah,
Like,
like,
let
I
us
know,
know.
like,
What do you want to see us? What do you
I
want
don't
to
go
chat to
back
us
and
about?
archive in people's episodes. So if you want us to repeat one or whatever,
Yeah.
let us know. If you're a realtor or a consumer, either way, we'd love to hear what you have to say. And thanks for joining us today. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Enjoy your day.
Bye. Way to get a picture.